The Art Director's Debrief, Special Investigation, Part 2, From Victim to Virtuoso, The Rise of Fanny Hill. Hello and welcome back to the Emotive archive. In the first part of our investigation, we explored the scene of the crime, the vibrant, chaotic, and deeply hypocritical canvas of 18th century London, re-established the world that gave birth to Fanny Hill. Today, we turn our focus from the canvas to the portrait itself. We will trace the incredible journey of our narrator, Fanny, a journey that subverts every expectation of the fallen woman narrative. The traditional story of a prostitute in the 18th century was a cautionary tale, a harlot's progress that began with lost innocence and ended in disease, despair, and a lonely grave. But John Cleland, in an act of radical rebellion, rips this narrative to shreds. He presents us not with the tragedy of descent, but with the comedy of ascent. This is not the story of a fall from grace. It is the story of a rise to power. Today, we will deconstruct Fanny Hill's journey, not as a victim, but as a student, an economist, a scientist, and ultimately a virtuoso of her own life. Our story begins with the classic archetype, the loss of innocence. Fanny Hill arrives in London as a 15-year-old orphan from Lancashire, her country's simplicity a stark contrast to the sophisticated corruption of the city. She is, in the opening chapters, the quintessential victim of a sentimental novel. She's naive, penniless, and vulnerable. Her fall into prostitution is not a conscious choice, but the result of deception. An old woman, Mrs. Brown, preys on her innocence, luring her into what Fanny believes is a respectable position as a lady's maid, but which is, in fact, a high-class brothel. This initial sequence is crucial because it aligns with the reader's expectations. We are prepared for a tragic tale of a young girl's ruin. Cleland masterfully sets up this conventional narrative framework only to systematically demolish it in the chapters that follow. The first part of her journey is indeed a story of victimhood, but it is the last time she will be truly powerless. The brothel of Mrs. Brown and later Mrs. Cole is the second stage of her journey, and it is here that the novel's first great subversion occurs. From an artistic perspective, these houses of pleasure are not depicted as dens of iniquity and despair, as they are in Hogarth's Prince. Instead, Cleland paints them as academies or convents of pleasure. They are structured, orderly institutions dedicated to the study and practice of a particular art form. This is not a world of brutal exploitation, but of education. Fanny is not simply sold to the highest bidder, she is trained. The other more experienced courtesans act as her teachers, her mentors. She is taught not just the physical acts of sex, but the entire performance of a woman of pleasure, how to dress, how to speak, how to carry herself, how to feign emotion, and how to manage the delicate egos of her male clients. This is a transgressive, satirical inversion of the traditional finishing school for young ladies. While respectable women were taught to repress their sexuality and master the arts of domesticity to secure a husband, Fanny is taught to embrace her sexuality and master the arts of seduction to secure her financial independence. The brothel becomes a space of female learning and empowerment, a parallel underground university where the curriculum is the art of pleasure itself. This education leads to the third and most radical stage of her development, the rise of Fanny Hill as a skilled economist. As she moves from a passive victim to an active participant, she begins to understand the fundamental economic reality of her world. She learns that her body, her beauty, and her charm are her primary assets, her stock in trade. And she learns to manage these assets with the skill of a shrewd businesswoman. She is no longer just being sold, she is selling. She assesses her clients, understands their desires, and negotiates her own terms. Her journey is a chronicle of her growing economic agency. She moves from being a kept mistress, dependent on a single patron, to becoming an independent courtesan who manages her own finances and chooses her own clients. In an era where a woman's only path to financial security was through marriage or inheritance, Fanny carves out a third path. She becomes a self-made woman, an entrepreneur whose business is pleasure. This depiction of a prostitute as an intelligent and successful economic agent was profoundly subversive. It challenged the patriarchal notion that women were incapable of financial independence and presented a fallen woman not as a tragic drain on society, but as a rational actor within a complex market. Parallel to her economic education is her intellectual one. This is the fourth stage of her journey, where she transforms into a scientist of pleasure. Fanny's narrative voice is one of the most remarkable aspects of the novel. She recounts her sexual experiences not with the breathless passion of a romantic heroine or the shameful guilt of a repentant sinner, but with the cool, detached, and often humorous curiosity of an Enlightenment philosopher. She is an empiricist of the flesh. She observes, she analyzes, she categorizes. Her memoirs are, in essence, a scientific journal, a taxonomy of human desire. She describes her clients not as lovers, but as specimens, each with their own unique deformities of fancy and singularities of taste. She analyzes the mechanics of arousal, the nuances of pleasure, and the psychology of her partners with a startlingly modern, almost clinical precision. She is a student of human nature in its most raw and unvarnished form. This is a brilliant satirical stroke by Cleveland. He takes the language of the Royal Society, the passion for observation and categorization that defined the Age of Reason, and applies it to the one subject that was considered beyond the pale of respectable inquiry. Fanny is not just a body to be enjoyed. She is a mind that observes, analyzes, and understands. She is a philosopher of the boudoir, a scientist of sex. This journey of education, emotional, economic, and intellectual, culminates in the novel's final and most shocking subversion, the happy ending. After a long and successful career, Fanny is reunited with her first true love, Charles. She has, through her work, amassed a considerable fortune. She is now an independently wealthy woman. And so she is able to marry Charles not as a dependent, but as an equal. The novel concludes with her living a life of perfect, respectable, and wealthy domestic bliss. This is the ultimate rebellion against the cautionary tale. The harlot's progress does not end in a grave, but in a country estate. In the moral universe of the 18th century, this was an unforgivable crime. The novel suggests that a woman's sexual past does not have to define her future. It argues that a fallen woman can, through her own intelligence and skill, achieve the same happy ending as the most virtuous of heroines. Her final happiness is not an act of divine salvation from her sins. It is the logical and well-earned reward for her hard work, her pragmatism, and her profound understanding of the world. She has played the game of society, and she is won, not by being virtuous, but by being a virtuoso. In that, to the establishment of the time, was the most dangerous and unforgivable idea of all.